Hi, welcome to this live webinar. This week we're talking about a number of different things which have affected expats living and working abroad. What might they be, you would wonder? Well, it's been a bit of a year, bit of a week for us, um, to say the least. Last week we previewed that in the big scheme of things, what was going on in Azerbaijan for them to be allowed to effectively create 100,000 asylum seekers, leaving the enclave of Nagorno-Karabakh to go into Albania. And the distinction that we identified is Azerbaijan, the core religion is Shia Muslim, the same as Iran, whereas the Armenians are Orthodox Christians. And the protector, the human international guarantor of that peace was Russia, and yet they said nothing to this change of circumstance. So it seems a bit of a coincidence then that the following week we get our friends in Hamas, the same Shia type of Muslims, supported openly straight away by Iran, starting a bit of a fight with the Israelis, with the potentially severe consequences that has. And it shows how we must be careful about where we're living and working abroad, and that you must be aware of the circumstances in which you live. Politics change, political situations change for everybody, and it can be quite an interesting challenge for expats when their circumstances might change when they're living and working abroad. So the situation, if you're an expat in Israel now, is that flights will stop and you're in a potential war zone. It's not that the whole country is not necessarily safe. It's just you've got this particular war zone where people are under threat and issues are being raised. So there is this potential alliance in a reorganization of the world, that the Western democracies, as opposed to an autocracy type of government in Russia and India and China, and how will that play out going forward? So obviously we've got this situation where in Israel now, the potential of an escalation between Israel and Iran could lead to an excuse for the Russians to escalate their situation around that. We said last week that Azerbaijan is a country that's beginning to surround and protect Ukraine, but it also creates a buffer and a protection zone between Russia and China and Iran, with Kazakhstan, Georgia, Armenia and Azerbaijan all having significant international interference from Russia or another state. And now that's involving Lebanon and the Gaza Strip being involved in that as well. So it's interesting to see how that will go, and we need to take care of that in the weeks ahead, to how you plan that you're going to be living and working abroad. What you will see, what we have seen as well in the last couple of weeks, is a couple of other significant changes coming up in the Middle East. We've seen that an OPEC conference with the Saudi oil minister raising the price of Saudi oil. The week before, the Gaza Strip event, and the troubles broke out there. Now, they announced that with Russia, and at the same time, they're also trying, under their new leadership, to create a new arrangement between Saudi and Israel and America to have like a more peaceful coexistence along the lines that you would have with Egypt and Israel. So Egypt have got a border with Israel. They did an agreement many years ago, as does the Gaza Strip border on Egypt, but the rest of it borders on Israel. So under the new Saudi Crown Prince, they're trying to get better relations around the world and have that influential way of being. But part of OPEC's investment in their future, part of Saudi's investment in their future needs a revenue from oil. And by increasing the price, it enables them to have more money to invest in creating jobs and opportunities in Saudi Arabia, in the same way that you can go to Qatar, UAE or Dubai and enjoy a different type of environment. And there's many expats and overseas businesses based in the low tax Middle East environment now to enjoy that benefit. And Saudi is getting on that bandwagon, for want of a better word, creating Neon City on the Red Sea coast as a way of building up their potential economic sustainability post oil. And the revenue from the oil price can do that. And so OPEC, Saudi and Russia, two of the biggest oil producers in the world, raising the prices to try and make their mark around the world. And you would have thought that'd be all very well, but all is not always a bed of roses. There's an interesting situation that goes on in the Middle East. If you look at sporting rights around the world, there's a TV organisation that you may or may not have seen called Bein TV, BIEN, or Benin, or whatever you want to pronounce it. But this is Qatari based. So the Qatari small emirate in the Saudi Arabian Peninsula has this satellite TV business, has the right to promote and show live sports coverage around the world. And many countries have benefits from these feeds to allow them to do that. And you thought that'd be absolutely wonderful. But what's the situation for expats in Saudi Arabia? Are you able to watch Premier League or other major global sporting events? Well, yes, you are. But you can't register and log into Bein TV from Qatar because of a long-standing dispute between Saudi and Qatar, where effectively the state of Saudi Arabia blocks the Benin feed, but then steals it and makes it available to people in Saudi Arabia illegally. So expats or anybody living in Saudi Arabia that's getting access to international sports events are actually watching illegally streamed TV that have been paid for and part of the Qatari situation. And what's that all about? It's about Saudi Arabia being the top dog, and with the new Crown Prince asserting his personality to be the top dog in the Middle East, it could create quite an interesting scenario for expats living and working abroad. So you need to make that assessment. Saudi Arabia should be a stable state. There's no reason why it can't continue to be for another 150 years. The Middle East countries that you're beginning to creep into the areas of these conflicts. So Egypt and Saudi, stable countries, as are UAE, Dubai, and Qatar, international outward-looking countries. But are these areas of conflict now in the Gaza Strip in Israel? but before in Yemen, in the south of the Saudi Arabian Peninsula, which is a conflict. And again, it's about Shiite versus Shia Muslims, two different sects, in the same way that you've got Christian and Orthodox and Roman Catholic Christians. So it's something to be aware of when you're planning on your living and working abroad and your flights overseas. And you can look at that scenario and make your judgments and decide what suits you best in terms of when you're living and working abroad. There's different opportunities for different people in different circumstances, but the world order doesn't always stay the same, and if governments, autocratic governments, take more of an influence and sway, same way that they did 70 years ago, then it could create a long period of settlement and unsettlement. And like we said, the impact in the West is when you've got economic migrants using asylum-seeking rules, like the Armenians from Nagorno-Karabakh in Azerbaijan, and anybody that flees from the Gaza Strip, they will be legitimate asylum seekers, not economic migrants. But that is a source of conflict around the world, which needs to create among the democracies a different way of managing that situation to make the EU and the democracies viable in the long term, so that they're not building walls between America and Mexico, and they're not turning boats back in the Channel or the Mediterranean trying to land in Italy. So any guidance that you want when you're living and working abroad, relocating overseas, contact us at proactpartnership.com. I want to look now at a couple of things regarding tax for expats living and working abroad. First of all, let's look at residency. When you're resident abroad, when you're living and working abroad, you need to have your bank account, and expats need to take care with their bank account, because a bank has to have a license and an authorization to operate, and that license, that authorization to operate, varies slightly differently. It's based upon international rules approved and issued under OPEC, but those international rules are varied on a local basis, and then can again be implemented on a slightly different basis, not from the local sovereign rules, but for any individual bank. And the bank needs certain resources and certain will to handle and deal with different types of clients. When a bank takes on a corporate client, an investment client, a trust client, an expat client, a business client, an individual client, a political client, they all have different levels of risks, and individual banks need to make those individual decisions for that. And one of the very easiest decisions for a bank to make is not to serve somebody that's living and working in another country. Every couple of years, you need to provide your name, address, identity verification for a bank. Have in mind now that also that the banks want your tax identity and maybe your social insurance number details as well. So if you want a residency permit in the EU, in Cyprus, in the UK, you need to have proof of income and bank statements to validate that. The country might require you to have a bank account in that locality, but you need to have a resident permit or be approved to become a resident in that country before you can start opening the bank account. Some countries require you to get your a visa to enter the country in the first place, or permit to come and work in the country in the first place. Other countries allow you to get there and do that. So an EU citizen can come to a country like Cyprus in 90 days. In another country where you're intending to stay longer term, like Ireland, you need to get the authority and the permit before you travel. For more information and guidance on relocating overseas and what identity verification, tax registration, social insurance registration you need to be working remotely, contact us at proactpartnership.com. It's a bit of a paper chase for UK tax returns at the moment. By the end of October, UK paper tax returns are due to be submitted. However, you can submit them online right through to the end of January. So the first deadline for UK tax returns is the end of October. The second deadline online submission is the end of January. For expats, you cannot fill out an online return through the HMRC portal. You need to do it through independent software and through using tax agents as appropriate, such as proactpartnership.com. So if you're an expat and you've got interests in the UK, where you've got fixed income, or you're relocating in or out of the UK, you may well need to do a tax return for 1 or 2 years, and you want help and guidance on completing those returns. Proact Partnership can help you. So even if you want to submit your return as an expat before the end of October, you've still got to do that return online. So Proact Partnership can help you do that. And for more information and guidance, contact us at proactpartnership.com. You may want to include a split year if you relocated in the last year and you haven't specifically made a claim for any tax rebate or tax adjustment for your period of working outside the UK or inside the UK, then you can include that on the tax return. So if you've returned to the UK on the 1st of October, for example, and you've been working abroad between April and September, you could quite easily have use your 2023 or 2024 tax return to declare that you're a non-resident and have a split year during that transfer year. And that could be part of the tax return that you complete online rather than submitting 2 or 3 separate returns. All good expatriate advice, tax planning services. For more information and guidance, contact us at proactpartnership.com. Cyprus tax returns are often a mystery, and the deadlines often change. They never seem to stay still, and each year circumstances change. Last year, when completing 2021 returns, the final deadline actually became the end of November 22, extended all the way from April multiple times during the year. In 2023, we're seeing the same thing. The original tax return was due to be launched and to submit from March by the end of July. And unfortunately, the software actually wasn't available to submit only an online return until the end of July. But the deadline now has been extended, not from the end of July to the end of September, but then again to the end of October now for all returns. For 2022, return due now by October 23, anybody who's a Cyprus tax resident who's got an income over 19,500 euros needs to do a tax return. However, there's some ambiguity about that because there's certain people in Cyprus that need to do a tax return. If you've got tax to pay, you need to do a tax return. If you're selling property or business, you need a tax return. If you die and you're doing a probate administration, you need to do a tax return. So there's actually many instances when you could be required retrospectively to do a tax return, or you've got a tax liability which you may not be paying because there's no way for the Cyprus tax authorities to tax you at source on your worldwide income, which is your liability in Cyprus. It might only be a 2% tax, and it might only be 2% tax on 100 euros, but it's still a tax liability that you have in Cyprus, which could potentially cause penalties and difficulties later on when selling property or relocating away from Cyprus. From 2024, that is for the full calendar year 2023 tax return, all Cyprus tax residents need to complete a return. So this will be a new rule for next year. What the due date will be is a mystery. We don't know what that will be yet. So normally it's by April next year. Everybody will have to complete a tax return, but they could easily create a more longer term prospect. But that waits to be seen whether they allow for the annual tax return to be completed by June or July, which is more the situation you get in Portugal or Spain. For any overseas tax returns or tax advice for expats living and working abroad, contact us at proactpartnership.com. So what we've discussed this week is a broad issue on the changes and the challenges for expats with a change in political environment or hostilities breaking out. You can have an unsettled area, but it can still be safe for you to live for many years. But conflicts can break out. You need to be aware of that and adapt to those changing environments. You have got your banking arrangements that are changing and that the rules are evolving. If you want to have a bank account, the bank has to be able to offer you that service depending upon whether you're a business, an individual, a company, an expat. All those things can vary the situation, whether they will allow you to have a bank account. We talked about that UK tax returns are due on paper this month, but expats have to do an online return anyway. So there's still a bit of time. Whether you want the return done now or before January, contact us at proactpartnership.com. And for Cyprus tax residents, you should do a return if you've got any tax liability on your worldwide income or you've got property to sell in the future. But otherwise, from next year, you will have to do one anyway. For more information and guidance, contact us at proactpartnership.com, and we'll see you again next time.